I never thought the story that would ignite a justice revolution would start with a $500 fine and 12 minutes of lateness. But it did. In a courtroom known more for fear than fairness, one woman refused to lower her gaze. What began as a routine hearing spiraled into a full-scale reckoning of power, prejudice, and the price of silence. This isn't just about a corrupt judge or a courageous congresswoman. It's about what happens when someone finally says, enough. If you've ever wondered what justice looks like when it fights back, keep watching. The storm starts now. 9:26 a.m. The iron gates of Franklin County Courthouse groaned as a gust of cold wind swept through. Inside, the marble floor shimmered under pale yellow lighting. The hallway, lined with silent observers and courthouse clerks, buzzed with tension just beneath the surface. Then, click, 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 sharp heels echoed down the corridor. Jasmine Crockett stormed in, not with fury but with focus. Her eyes were set, her breath steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. In her left hand, a folded memo marked classified. She had just ended an emergency call with the House Oversight Committee, another report of inmate abuse at North Georgia Correctional. There'd been no time to change clothes, no time to delegate. And now, she was 12 minutes late. Just 12 minutes, she whispered to herself. But to a man like Whitlow, that's an invitation to swing the axe. Inside the courtroom, Judge Warren Whitlow sat perched atop his bench like a bird of prey. His gray robes cast a shadow over the polished wood, and his gavel snapped like a rifle. Congresswoman or not, tardiness shows contempt. $500 fine, he declared without blinking. Gasps filled the room. Reporters' lenses clicked into focus. Jasmine inhaled once and stepped toward the podium. Her voice didn't waver. I wasn't late out of disregard for this court. I was late because I was dealing with the consequences of justice gone wrong. Whitlow gave a slow, sarcastic grin. Is that your reason or your excuse? Jasmine met his gaze. You're not applying justice, Judge. You're wielding power like a whip. And this courtroom isn't your stable. The silence that followed was volcanic. In the back row, an elderly black man nodded slowly, eyes glassy. A woman clutched her purse closer to her chest. Jasmine didn't flinch. Neither did Whitlow. The line had been drawn, and the public, barely breathing, had just watched the first strike land. Jasmine stood firm. Your Honor, I request to address the court. Whitlow, eyebrows arched, paused. The request was procedural, but her tone was anything but. He gave a reluctant nod. Jasmine turned toward the room. Canon 3B5 of the Judicial Conduct Code, she began, states that a judge must not let personal bias or prejudice affect their decisions. A camera zoomed in. Whitlow's jaw clenched. His grip on the gavel tightened until his knuckles blanched. You're accusing this court of bias? He barked. I'm reminding this court what justice looks like, Jasmine replied. Calm, controlled, devastating. Inside his mind, Whitlow seethed. She thinks that seat in Congress makes her untouchable. She's about to learn who really runs this room. He leaned forward, voice sharper now. Another word out of turn, and I'll fine you for contempt. Again. Jasmine didn't blink. Silence is the reason injustice thrives, and I won't be part of that silence. Outside the courtroom, Candace Roy paced beneath the steps, phone in hand. A message buzzed in. He's done this before. I was a clerk. I have files. Candace's eyes widened. She turned to her assistant. It's bigger than one moment. We're not letting this die in the courtroom. Inside, the energy was shifting. Reporters uploaded the first clips. One caption read, Congresswoman Monroe confronts power-drunk judge. The hashtag Justice Not Power flickered across X, formerly Twitter. A spark had been lit. Whitlow, visibly rattled, moved to adjourn. Court will resume pending further summons. The Congresswoman's conduct will be noted in the record. But as Jasmine walked out, something had changed. The stares were different now. No longer she was late. They read, she just declared war. That night, the Monroe District Office didn't sleep. A faint glow leaked from the second-story windows, cutting through the quiet of Jackson Heights like a lighthouse in a storm. Inside, The tension was thick. Coffee sat cold, papers scattered, screens glowed. Jasmine Crockett sat at the head of the conference table, hair pulled into a tight ponytail, the lines under her eyes deeper than usual. She didn't speak at first. She just stared at a wall covered in case files, headlines, and yellow post-its. Then, quietly but with finality, she said, "We're not attacking him. We're exposing the system that enables him." Ethan Brooks, her young legal aide, immediately opened his laptop. "I've already pulled 5 years of sentencing records from Whitlow's docket," he said. 48% higher incarceration rates than the state average. Mostly defendants under 25. Marcia Whitaker, former prosecutor and the seasoned voice in the room, leaned forward, sliding over 3 folders. These are 3 appeals he'd denied. All of them had conflicting testimony. One had no physical evidence at all. Candace Roy sat at the far end, thumbing through her phone. "Twitter's heating up," she said. Hashtag #WhitlowWrongs just hit trending in Georgia. People are posting clips of him berating defendants, even kids. Jasmine's fingers drummed against her mug. "Good. Now we need more than clips. We need stories, patterns, data." Then came the message. Candace looked down at her phone and froze. "Emily Chu," she whispered. "She was Whitlow's courtroom clerk 2 years ago." She turned the phone so they could all see. "I remember hearing him call a defendant trash that doesn't know how to listen. If you need me, I'll speak." Jasmine's expression hardened. "She's the first brick. We build the wall from here." Candace began editing together an anonymous video. Audio confessions from past courtroom victims, layered over slow images of Whitlow's bench. The words, "Justice begins with a voice," scrawled across the screen. As it exported, Jasmine stood up and faced the wall of case files. She stared at the map of damage one man had caused, her voice low, steady. "Tomorrow, I'm going back, but not as a defendant. I'm going as a witness." The next morning was cold again, but this time Jasmine wore black. No press, no entourage, just a long coat, ball cap, and sunglasses. She entered Franklin County Courthouse without a word, slipping into the back row like any other face in the crowd. She wasn't there to speak, she was there to watch. Andre Tate stood before Judge Whitlow that morning, a wiry, nervous 22-year-old black man charged with disorderly conduct. His eyes darted across the room, settling on nothing. Jasmine leaned forward slightly, flipping open a small notebook. Andre's lawyer motioned for dismissal due to lack of evidence. No body cam footage, no witness testimony, just an officer's report full of vague language. Whitlow didn't even glance at the motion. "Request denied," he said flatly. Andre opened his mouth, voice soft. "Sir? I didn't even—" "One more word and I'll hold you in contempt," Whitlow snapped. Andre bit his lip, glanced at his attorney. Then Whitlow leaned forward, eyes thin slits of disdain. 30 days in county. Maybe that'll teach you to respect the court." Gasps rippled across the benches. One woman stifled a cry. Jasmine froze, hand gripping her pen. She watched Whitlow, silent. Then, slowly, she stood, gathered her things, and walked out. She texted Candace just 5 words. "He did it again. I saw." Within minutes, MSNBC had the story. The Chiron read, "Congresswoman witnesses alleged judicial misconduct." Below it, "Who holds power accountable?" Jasmine's inbox flooded. One message read, "My daughter got 20 days for asking to call me." Another, "He yelled at me in front of my kids." Back at the office, Candace watched the news feed update and covered her mouth, tears forming. "You made them speak," she whispered. Jasmine stepped out onto the office balcony as dusk settled over Jackson Heights. Below her, a small crowd had gathered in front of the courthouse. Handmade signs waved in the wind. "Power Justice. We believe you, Jasmine." She looked down, then out at the sky, wind brushing her face. Voiceover, calm but resolute. "They don't have to believe me. They just need to see what I saw." The hearing room at Franklin County Courthouse was colder than usual. Sharp light pooled from overhead fluorescents bouncing off sterile white walls. The tension in the air was palpable, thick like fog, as if everyone present knew this day wasn't just procedural. It was a reckoning. Jasmine Crockett sat in the front row, wrapped in a charcoal gray suit, her shoulders square, expression unflinching. No makeup, no smile. Just focus, sharp, cutting, unwavering. Across the aisle sat Judge Warren Whitlow, legs crossed, fingers drumming against his knee. His confidence remained on the surface, but his eyes flickered every time the door opened. First to testify, Marcia Whitaker. Her voice trembled at first, recalling the time she was warned by a senior court officer to back off when she questioned one of Whitlow's sentencing decisions. "I was told I'd lose funding for my office," she said, jaw clenched, eyes firm. "That wasn't justice, that was fear." Next came Emily Chu, former court clerk. Her hands shook slightly as she held up a USB drive. On it, Whitlow's voice, clear as day. "These kids don't understand consequences. A week or two locked up teaches better than any lawyer." The silence in the room broke with a gasp. A journalist sitting 3 rows back wiped away tears without looking up from her notes. Then a young Latina defense attorney stepped up. She took a deep breath, opened her file, but her voice cracked. "He called me an immigration stage actress when I challenged his ruling," she whispered, clutching her statement to her chest. Her sob caught in her throat. No one moved. And then came Jasmine. No speech in hand, no notes, just her voice, and all it carried. "I'm not here to tell you my pain," she began. "I'm here to strip away the mask that's been allowed to sit on this bench for too long." She recounted watching Whitlow's court as a public defender. "I've seen young people punished for asking if they could speak. I've seen fear mistaken for disrespect. And I've watched silence be rewarded while truth was punished." She looked each council member in the eye. "And I know I'm lucky, because most people don't get cameras or microphones or congressional titles. They just get crushed." When she stepped down, no one clapped, but the quiet was thunderous. 30 minutes later, the panel returned. A gray-haired woman at the center read the decision. "Judge Warren Whitlow is hereby placed on immediate suspension pending formal investigation." Jasmine lowered her head, just slightly. The older woman sitting beside her reached for her hand. "You're doing what we never could," she whispered. And someone in the back cried, this time not from fear, but from relief. Washington, D.C. A different courtroom, a different kind of silence, the kind that precedes change. Jasmine Crockett stood tall before the House Judiciary Subcommittee, her voice now echoing not through marble courtrooms but across federal airwaves. Behind her, charts, affidavits, testimony. Beside her, civil rights lawyers, public defenders, survivors of the system. Above them, a banner reading, "Public Hearing, the People Act. Oversight for Local Justice and Anti-Bias Training." "The name Whitlow may fade," Jasmine began, "but what he represents cannot go unchallenged. This bill is not a punishment, it's a promise." She detailed every measure: community-based court review boards, mandatory anti-bias training for all judges, open feedback systems allowing defendants and attorneys to report misconduct. The foundation of the system would no longer rest on silence. But transparency, her words were clipped, controlled yet filled with unmistakable passion. "We've built a culture where power hides behind robes. But justice is not supposed to hide." In the back row of the chamber, a little black girl sat on her mother's lap, holding a cardboard sign with blue crayon scribbled across it, "I won't be afraid of court when I grow up." A camera caught the moment, her eyes wide, watching Jasmine as if she were watching a superhero rise. The bill passed the House, soon after, the Senate, and change began. Back in Jackson Heights, a new sign was placed on the courthouse entrance, now under community oversight. New judges took the bench, ones who had completed transparency certifications. Sentencing reviews were now public record, and complaints no longer disappeared into filing cabinets. At the Holloway Community Justice Center, a mural appeared, larger than life. Jasmine Crockett stood at the center, one hand on the scales of justice, the other holding open a courtroom door. From inside the door, golden light poured out across faceless silhouettes, each one once silenced, now seen. Below, in bold letters, Justice isn't earned in silence, it's demanded in presence. That evening, Jasmine stepped out onto the courthouse steps. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows behind her. She paused, just a second, and looked out over a city no longer afraid to speak. Her voice, soft and resolute, carried into the dusk. I came here because of a clerical error. But maybe justice had been waiting a long time for someone to knock. Sometimes justice doesn't roar, it whispers. It stumbles in late, burdened by truth, and is told to sit down. But when it stands, quiet, steady, unshaken, it reminds us that the law is not sacred because of who holds the gavel, but because of those who dare to challenge it. Power, unchecked, becomes tradition. But tradition can be rewritten. One voice, one act, one refusal to stay silent at a time. If this story moved you, made you think, or gave you hope, don't let it stop here. Leave a comment, share your thoughts, and subscribe for more stories that speak truth to power. Because sometimes the most important verdicts aren't handed down, they're echoed by the people who choose to care.